This is going to be a blast.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the first of hopefully many Think Innovation Live with Michael Tedesco, Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal, and myself. And a quick shout out to Stacy Corso, who introduced us many years ago. So I'm appreciative of that. We're looking forward to interviewing and talking with Jim Vanover, who is in the Chief Innovation Office. He is an innovation technology evangelist, futurist for ServiceNow. And Jim, what I'd like to chat about or kick things off are, pre-COVID studies showed and pointed to that by the year 2030, 85% of the jobs that existed do not exist today. And I could point out some other studies, but for the sake of discussion, I think that one is pretty poignant in the sense of I think COVID fast forwarded us about 5 years at least and got everybody fast forwarded with technology and innovation, but mentally they're still in 1999, I think, a lot of times. And so just to kick things off, what does innovation mean today as we sit here on, I always have to remember the date, December 15th, 2020?
John, I will actually, we probably read the same things. I will take it one step further and say that COVID has multiplied it actually 10x. It is compressed time 10x from where we're sitting. We've taken 10 years of innovation, digital transformation, and compressed it into essentially 1 year. But you're right. It is the technology is one thing, and the realization that we need this is one thing. Now the question is, how do you change the minds? How do you change the behavior? What we call organizational change management. How do you manage the people involved?
Yeah.
Because the technology, in many ways, the technology is much easier to change than the humans are.
That's true.
So the real challenge is, as you say, how do you get awareness? How do you get implementation? And then how do you get adoption?
Well said.
And Jim, say more about, well, first, can you give everybody just a quick primer on what ServiceNow is?
Yeah,
it's a huge technology company, but I think a lot of people don't know about ServiceNow. And then just talk a little bit about internally, like how has it accelerated your own roadmap and what you're building for customers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't want to spend too much time on it, obviously, because most of what I'm about to say is on the internet. But ServiceNow is what we call a platform of platforms company. It's designed to allow workflows to pass easily between whatever an enterprise company is using to engage with. Say you've got Slack, you've got Teams, etc., and then what your systems you're using. So if you've got Microsoft Dynamics, if you've got Adobe, if you've got SAP, oftentimes, most of the time in an enterprise company, your employees spend a lot of time navigating, or what we call swivel chairing, between those different systems. And so our company creates an action layer of workflows between how I naturally engage, that consumerization of the enterprise. Like, I just want to know how stuff works. I don't want to have to go hunting for it. And then where the information actually lives. And so that's ServiceNow's differentiator. That's what we do. And then internally, it really is customer centric. I mean, you hear this from marketing teams all over the globe these days. And one of the things that I like about Mike, you're at PayPal and ServiceNow as well, is how customer focused both companies are. And I think you're going to hear more and more. And John, you've heard from guest after guest after guest that you've interviewed. The successful companies now and in the future will be the customer centric companies. In that, from an innovation standpoint, the way we innovate is how do we take the customer feedback and incorporate it into our DevOps and our R&D processes? And that I'm oversimplifying, obviously, but that's how it works. That's the core.
Yeah. And when I love that, and the customer centricness and creating that not only experience for the end user. I just want to go back to something Mike talked about, the experience internally and facilitating that same type of culture internally, so people feel it, experience it, live it. It's kind of like BMW. There's many stories about people go into BMW knowing all the research. Now they're opening up places where you can actually test drive on a racetrack because it needs to be that experiential. And so how do you create that experiential internal culture so your people are actually walking ambassadors for the brand?
And the answer to that is a cliche of we drink our own champagne. We have an entire organization under our chief information officer called Now on Now. And that is where really a lot of the core innovations for our company come out of, because we are continually using and iterating on our own technology. So we'll discover things that the platform can do. We'll discover things the platform can't do. Okay, how do we make it do that? So it really is, being customer zero is incredibly powerful.
And Jim, then so eat your own dog food. And apologies, like if you hear, literally, I'm above a garage that is being completely torn apart right now. So apologies to everybody who is watching this. So eating your own dog food, doing that, like, what else? Like, how do you drive innovation within your own culture as well? Can you dive deeper into that specifically? So you talked about being customer centric, but what are the other things that you do to just really drive innovation throughout the company?
Well, I think, Mike, you and I have talked about this for years, and it really is about cultivating the idea that anyone can innovate. That creating a culture whereby, and I understand different companies do it differently because they're structured differently. And actually, if I can take this opportunity to sort of talk about the spectrum of how you innovate internally, and making understanding how your company would best innovate, because obviously one size does not fit all. In fact, I would argue each one is unique, and you need to figure out what the optimal innovation is for your company. So if I can take, again, because we have the two of us on in this conversation, Mike. So you've got PayPal, and correct me if I'm wrong, PayPal innovating as a decentralized opportunity where literally everyone can innovate. And you're doing things like holding these global innovation tournaments and having utilizing the collective brain power of the entire company to create innovation. And then you've got the ServiceNows and the Microsofts of the world who are cultivating a culture similar to that decentralization, but then centralizing it from a thought leadership and a product standpoint, where we have a chief innovation officer, and it's our job under the chief innovation officer to be those thought leaders, both internally and externally. And then working closely with the product teams, our chief technology officer, for example, and making sure that we're all aligned and developing together both the messaging and the products.
I love what you're talking about, and I just want to highlight one thing that you said that I think is critical, that 99% of companies miss, and why they look at companies like ServiceNow and PayPal and drool how they're so innovative, and they could do this one simple thing. I love what you said, anyone can innovate. There are so many times as a business coach, I go into companies where I'll say to them, well, what does the person at the front desk think about X, Y, or Z? And they'll say, I don't know, we've never really talked to them about it. Or I'll say, well, what is the person at your team meeting that I've been at meetings that never speaks up think? They'll say, I don't know, et cetera, et cetera. But those people, a true innovator, knows that anybody can innovate, and you never judge a book by its cover. And you've got to be able to talk and ask and get the best ideas out of everyone, because the best ideas come from the previous ideas. So I love that both of your organizations are set on that foundation, so people can just kind of surrender and speak and be fluid.
So what I'm going to ask then, John, first of all, I'm going to ask Mike. Mike, please give my favorite quote. I can never remember that. My favorite quote around innovation. You know what it is?
Maya Angelou, or which one is it?
It's about you paid for my hands.
Oh, the Jack Welch quotes. Oh yeah, sure. I could. Do you want me to tell that story real briefly?
Yeah,
I could
just briefly.
Okay. So I started my career at GE, General Electric, back when like GE was the thing in the world, like it was the most valuable company in the world. Blah blah blah. Times have sadly changed there, but the story as it goes is Jack Welch was walking through, and this was an icon. Literally, Fortune called him the manager of the century. And so he was walking through a plant and stops to talk to somebody at in Louisville at our appliances. And this person's job is to put on refrigerator door handles. And so this person has, been doing this, and Jack's striking up this conversation. This person's been in the factory for 30 years. They're talking, and what goes from a formal handshake actually becomes an hour-long conversation that this super powerful CEO has, because this person is just a fountain of wisdom.
Yeah.
And as the story goes, at the end of this, basically the guy says to Jack, Jack, you've been paying for my hands for the last 30 years when you could have gotten my brain for free. And this was kind of the eye-opening thing to Welch of oh my God, there is innovation, there is great thoughts anywhere and everywhere throughout the organization.
Yeah.
So taking that idea, I wanted to use that as a springboard, as an action item for anyone who's listening. Figure out within your organizations how to deploy the minds of the people within your company. How do you as an organization take advantage of the brain power of the innovation and feed that back into your own company?
Yeah, I love that. My Jack Welch story is I have a client who ran into Jack Welch, had some time, spent some time with him. I think they had lunch. And one of the pieces of advice he gave to him is he said to this guy, I can lose 20 million in a day and still be in business next day. If you lose 20 million in one day, you're out of business. So make sure that you're making really good decisions. Yeah.
But I mean, there is something to that. I mean, there really is as well. When to be in a big conglomerate or a big company like GE or even ServiceNow or PayPal, certain parts of the business can completely fail. And you want the rest of the company is still there.
Yeah.
We don't like to see this happen or anything like that. That's part of the business model of this. And it makes it sometimes hard when you're a company going against a company where if it fails, it means everybody has to go home.
Yeah.
It means nobody has a job. There is that level of you have to figure out a way to make it succeed.
Right.
You have to innovate. You have to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I love that. We talk about the. Go ahead, Mike. You.
No. Actually, I got things go. You ask first.
Okay, you got the song in the background. So I want to talk about. I was in commercial real estate for a long time, 12, 13 years. And one of the things you do in commercial real estate is you're always forecasting, right? Everything is about looking at 10-year models and forecasting, of which most 10-year models are always wrong because the market is cyclical, et cetera, et cetera. And today, we're in a market where I think some people are having a hard time seeing what a year in front of them looks like or 3 years in front of them. Surely, with what you talked about, with things compressing 10 times, seeing what 2030 looks like is almost impossible. So being a futurist, how do you plan for the future, right? And execute daily, but pivot while still thinking big, but acting to the day?
Yeah. It's a great question, John, and don't call me Shirley.
Wait, keep talking. My dog's scratching at the door. Your saw's going off. I'm just getting my dog. Keep talking. All right.
So what we're seeing now is really what we have what we have been promoting, what we have been encouraging, what we have been leading for years is really about remaining agile. It is about how do you innovate today? Because at the end of the day, yes, for shareholders, for board members, you're going to need to be able to give roadmaps, and roadmaps are important in every aspect of business. You need to have something to look at and point at and have everybody going that direction. But the challenge, as you pointed out, is then particularly in this rapidly evolving environment, is then how do you remain agile? Yeah. And how do you, within that North Star, how do you adjust? And then make it one step more complicated. What if you have to change that North Star? And how do you keep everybody pointed at that direction? How do you create, and it's across the enterprise. We could spend an hour talking about the various parts of an organization that have to remain agile in order to successfully do this. And it is everything from hiring the right people who can remain agile, to having the right technology that empower them to remain agile, to having the right leadership who don't stick their head in the sand or get their feet stuck in concrete. And we hear day in and day out when we're reading, the internet, about CEOs who refuse to change or who refuse to innovate. And to that I say, okay, I'm going to pull my stock out of that company. Yeah. Because you're done. I will not name names, but I think it'll be pretty obvious. But there is a large movie theater company whose CEO basically said, we're not going to innovate. We are not going to change with the times with this COVID. It'll blow over and it'll be fine. Yeah. They're in big trouble now. As other companies like Amazon and Netflix and Universal and Warner Brothers, owned by AT&T, they just announced they are going hard on streaming with HBO, right? So while all these other companies see the writing on the wall and are remaining agile and pivoting with the times, you've got these other companies who are like, nope, this is going to work itself out. And that's the problem. That is what you need. You need leadership, you need the technology, and you need the employees all able to change, to adapt, and remain agile.
Yeah.
No, I think that's so well said. And I mean, I think it, as an outsider looking at this, you're just like, can't you see this? Like you're just burying their heads in the sand. Like everyone else in the world sees this. Why can't they? And that leads into my next question for you, Jim. Like, you are somebody who has had a very storied career in many different areas, and that's one thing I really respect about you. From being in front of the camera to kind of behind the camera to then moving into technology. In doing just very revolutionary things, especially in the world of entertainment that, ultimately brought you to the world of tech. Like, how is it that what are your habits? What are your tricks? What are the ways that you stay innovative in your day-to-day?
I'll tell you, Mike, I wish I had an innovative answer for you. But what I'm probably going to do is repeat something that everyone has said on every time they've ever been asked that question. I'm sure at least 3 or 4 of John's guests and his other podcasts have been asked this question. The answer is constantly learning. Learn to learn. If you don't know how to learn, or if you're a bad learner, or if you don't like to learn, figure out how you learn and be an avid learner. And even if you have to start in a place that is not related to what you do, the sheer habit of learning to learn will get you there eventually. Build that habit. Have a growth mindset. Because of that, I have been able to do these huge career shifts that, from the outside looking in, you think that would take you a decade to be able to do. And because I learned early on that I gobble up information. I want to know more stuff. When John pointed me at his podcast, I just started gobbling it up because he's got all of these great guests on it. Whenever you and I, Mike, were working together, it's just this constant learning between us. And just taking advantage of every single person that you come in contact with. That's the other thing. Don't underestimate anybody, ever. You can learn something from everybody. And I understand, again, that sounds like a cliche, but I have, to the example that was brought up earlier, everyone from the front desk service person all the way to the CEO. If you end up in a position where you can ask them a question that will enrich you, do it. Ask them the question. What's the worst thing that could happen? I ended up once in an elevator with a chief officer that I won't mention specifically, but we were in that elevator for probably 5 minutes. It was a really big building, and I was like, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. The worst that could happen is they're like, you know what? I don't want to be bothered. And that's not what happened. I had a really interesting 5-minute educational C-level conversation. And all I had to do was take a deep breath, have a little bit of courage, and ask the question.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're talking about, because I think tapping into courage is really difficult for people. And people seem to second guess themselves, just kind of like, I just like to expand on that, like going into 2021, what's the courage that people need to, think a little bit differently? There's many studies that are pointing to, as we come out of COVID, I'll send you guys a study that I just read yesterday. As we're coming out of COVID, there's going to be a lot of kind of like post-traumatic, stress that people are going to go through. There's a lot of fatigue that people are going to be going through. There's a lot of, we've been hearing a lot of just, mental, type of issues that people are having and will continue to have. And yet all those people, many of those people, I shouldn't say all, have families, and they have to come to work, and they have to sometimes leave it at the door. But the companies that are innovative are also taking care of their people and nurturing them while still holding them accountable. There's kind of that fine line that I think we're going to see next year. And so talk about innovating when it comes to people, when it comes to holding them accountable, because we are businesses, to managing from the heart and giving people leeway, but not excuses.
Yeah. So there's two things that I'm going to answer on that, and because it is a rather broad question. So again, we could talk about it for a long time. We'll talk about it. One, from the enterprise level, survey your employees. You can't do anything without the data. Figure out whatever you need to do. Obviously, ServiceNow, we deploy our own survey technology, and we are routinely surveying and making sure that those questions and the answers we get back are actionable, so that we can constantly understand our entire employee base. How comfortable are they in their virtual spaces? How comfortable are they going back to the office? When would they be ready? What other things do they need in this current environment? All of these important questions. And then we can take action. We can deploy what they need in those cases. So first of all, it's about understanding your employees, who they are, what they need, and how they feel. Yeah. The other part, from an individual level, you need to take ownership of your own innovation. And this is where I'm going to get a little bit fuzzy for a second, a little bit fluffy, but you need to start having an innovative mindset around your own life. Think outside the box. And in this case, literally outside the box, outside the four walls that I'm sitting in front of with the camera pointed at me and these lights. What is your life? Accept the fact that this is the new normal. The future is a hybrid normal, that we are never going back to where we were in 2019, and really plot out. If that means creating an all new, brand new schedule for you and your family and your children and your friends, do that. If it means figuring out what new things you need to bring in, do you need to convert one of the rooms in your house into a gym? Do you need to buy a bike? Do you need to figure out what safe resources you have nearby where you live? Ask yourself these questions. Is it buy a dog? Like, what? Really innovate around your own life. Really think outside the box on what is going to make this new normal the best normal for you. So I think that's the two lenses. Those are the two ends of the spectrum.
Right. Those are great lenses.
Jim, one last question for me. I know we're starting to run low on time here. So what's one thing that you are going to do? Either looking ahead into next year or tomorrow, or however you think about this, like what's one thing that you haven't done that you are going to start doing to be more innovative, to be more inclusive? I love the thought of lifetime learning and never underestimating, but what's something else that you're currently working on or will start to work on more?
It is networking with the thought leaders around innovation. While I've built a good sized network, I think now, again, to the point that we made at the very beginning, now that we've compressed down, it's squeezed the term innovation. And what's cropping up are all of the really great thought leaders in the space. So how can we create organizations? How can we create rooms, spaces? Is it a group? Is it a thread on Reddit? How can we create the optimal experience to get all of these brains together to create true thought leadership that can help us guide through this? And just a selfless plug, I'm already part of one of those organizations called Work Forward. You can find it at workforward.co. It's not even non-for-profit. It's just a group of thought leaders and futurists who are working on these exact problems all together. They're from all walks of life and from all over the globe.
I love it. That's great. What's one thing you're going to do, Mike?
Oh man, one thing now you're putting me on the spot, of course, other than getting my garage fixed so I don't have to have the banging and I could actually have a nice studio without the light coming in and all that.
All right.
Honestly, I think I trying to, I've been doing more journaling. That's one thing. But one thing that I do want to do more going forward is I actually want to learn a language. I'm 43 years old and I speak one language. And I've finally, I think it's come to me that this is something that I need to add to my tool chest. There's a company called Fluent Forever. It really resonated. Like it has to happen. 43 is a great age to learn a new language, I guess. So
I love it.
Never too old.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
What do you, John?
Well, I started playing guitar, taking lessons with my daughter, and I would love to learn a new language, but my phonics is so bad already with English. It's like I don't even know if I could handle another language, but I do want to learn another language. I've wanted to forever. I've downloaded a bunch of those apps. But one thing I've done from an innovative standpoint, also for my business, is a week or two ago, I launched group coaching, which I've never done before. I do trainings and I do one-on-one, but I've always been frustrated that I don't have something for people say, John, that's out of my budget or this, that, and the other. And so I created this affordable, fit in every budget group coaching so I can be surrounded by all these people and I can connect them to help them also grow their businesses, which I'm really excited about. So
that's great.
That's good. Yeah.
All right, Jim, you ready for the speed round?
Yes. Yeah. With courage.
All right. Yeah. So, first question: what is one thing that somebody can do to start being innovative today? Somebody who thinks they're just not innovative at all. What's one thing they can start doing to build that innovative, mindset?
I will say two things. One, meditate. Meditation will help clear the clutter out of your brain. The other thing, and I'll use Mike's background as an example, is pick a simple problem in your life, get a sticky notes, and just start writing down ideas around how to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Don't use the first several, but once you've got them all, I promise you, if you do that, say for 10 minutes, you just write down ideas, you will break through the barrier of yourself, if you'll pardon the expression. And the answer to your problem will be somewhere in that stack. Yeah. And then the real work begins. Yeah. Where is that problem and how do you deploy it?
That's well said. You know, I think a lot of people forget or don't realize that we take 7.3 million breaths a year, and that meditation and breathing is one of the fastest ways to get us out of fight or flight, and it can take 5 breaths and it's free. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm a big meditator. Mike, you got a question for Jim?
Yeah. So Jim, I guess, so what is the technology that you are most excited about? Like that isn't really in the world yet. Future. Come on, futurist Jim.
That's a great question.
That isn't in the world yet.
Or it's just, you know, it's not really at scale, I guess.
Well, Mike, you knowing me as you do, I think you know where I'm going to go with this. So thank you for leading me to water. I want a world where virtual reality, consumer grade technology is inherent in the world. It's affordable, it's easy, it's consumer grade, and it's portable. So that my glasses can act as virtual reality technology, because the barriers to virtual technology are everything, the opposite of everything that I just mentioned. And once we've unlocked VR for the average consumer, the sky's the limit, in my opinion. Now we're talking Star Trek, we're talking holodecks, we're talking, there's just so many applications, field service management in terms of teaching people how to interact with each other, how to interact with hardware. I could go on and on about it. Virtual reality, absolutely.
I got a guy that I may want to introduce you guys to if you want to, who's focuses on AI. And he was telling me that right before COVID hit at the Metro airport, that they were about to launch that if myself, my wife, and my kids were all in front of a billboard, we would all be seeing something different, standing all next to each other because of AI and all that other crazy stuff. But it's
right.
Favorite book and why?
My favorite book and why. Jagar Innovation. I cannot stress it enough. I think what happens, particularly in the United States, is that we get very US centric in our mindset, and there's an inherent thought process that is cultural to the United States. So I encourage anyone to explore regional literature, podcasts, books, whatever, outside of your own region, whether that's the UK or Australia or India or China or wherever. And my book was Jagar Innovation.
Nice. Mike, last question.
What's your favorite failure?
What is my favorite failure? Oh, gosh. I think that would have to go back to my previous life, my previous career. I won't mention the project because I might get a couple of people in trouble, but we were working on a virtual reality project for a major studio, and we failed 3 times before we actually found the solution. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars on each attempt. At the time, I was working for a technology company that developed innovative technology for media companies. And sort of our job was to fail and then get it right. But that one was the hardest. We failed way more times than we had ever failed before. And it was on the border of bankruptcy failure. I will not take 100% credit for being part of that. It was obviously a team effort, and we did pull it off at the end, as we always did. But that's probably my favorite failure to date. And it's probably only my favorite because we didn't actually end up failing in the end. But that brings up, I will say this to my last point, actually, Mike, I will use that as a springboard. You have to fail. Innovation is about failing over and over and over again. The companies that think I can't afford to do R&D are wrong. You can't afford to not do it. You have to throw the spaghetti against the wall repeatedly. You have to fail. Otherwise, you're never going to make that basket. What's the basketball quote? You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Yeah.
Yep. It's great. I love everything you had to share today, Jim, from having an innovative mindset, have an innovative mindset for your whole life, failing over and over again until you get it right, having a growth mindset, knowing how you learn, being innovative, hiring the right people, having the right technology, having the right leadership, being agile, being able to adjust. I mean, looking at the minds of your organization and how you can deploy them. Anybody can innovate, being customer centric and focused. I mean, this was a PhD in innovation, and I appreciate all of your time and your insights. Tell people how to get a hold of you and, who your ideal clients are and all that other great stuff.
Real quick, actually, for you, John, I'll do a shameless plug. I started listening to your podcast, Think Business. My favorite Think Business episode is Matching Passions and Skills with Nick Davis. So anyone listening to this who wants to hear more sort of in the similar vein, I'd highly recommend that one. How to contact me, the big ones for business are on Twitter and LinkedIn. If you want to follow me personally, I'm also on Instagram and actually all the other platforms. I make it a point to master my own brand. So all you have to do is find Jim Vanover on any of the given platforms, and I've probably got the domain. My favorite customers, Microsoft, actually. I think Microsoft doesn't get enough credit where credit is due. They have created an enterprise level company that they have become so good at what they provide that we take it for granted. I do it on a daily basis. Microsoft is part of my life. Most of the time I don't even notice. So Microsoft, incredibly innovative company. And again, the average consumer doesn't think of them that way. Yeah. They just get annoyed if their Word doc doesn't save properly or something like that. And it's like,
yeah, they're still mad about Clippy. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I appreciate it, Jim. I'm going to let Mike close this out, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate Mike introducing
Absolutely,
us.
my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Mike, I'll let you close it out.
Absolutely. No, Jim, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining. And thank all of you for watching and listening. Please, love to hear your feedback and comments. I'm also on socials at Tedasco is where you can find me. Would love to hear comments and feedback and what you learned from this. And in the words of the great Jim Vanover, never underestimate anybody.
I love it. Amen to that. Thanks, fellas. That was
fun.
Thanks,
Mike. Thanks, John.
Appreciate everybody.
Appreciate it.